All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to look at topic 1.4, that's sustainability. And even though sustainability is a very, very short section of the book in the first unit, it will continue to come up throughout this entire course, so we want to make sure we have a strong base. First, you can see the key knowledge and understanding. This is from the IB guide, which is on the Google website as well. But you can pause and read through them and just make sure that you understand these key points, because this is telling you exactly what they want you to know. So to start off, we're going to look quickly at sustainability again. We keep going over this in class. So this is the idea that we can use something to meet our current needs without causing any damage. So we're not causing any permanent environmental damage or causing damage that would prevent future generations from being able to meet their needs as individuals. So if you think about sustainability, okay, a counter example of sustainability would be the Onceler chopping down all the trufula trees in the Lorax. So that was, an act against sustainability. It was unsustainable because there were no trees for future generations. So when we talk about sustainability, we are of course naturally bringing up this idea of natural resources. So we have to look really quickly at our natural resources for a refresher. So natural resources provide us with everything we need. Okay, electricity, fuel, recreation, something pretty to look at, all of those things. So the word aesthetics really just means something nice to look at. Okay, it's aesthetically pleasing, so it's good to look at. Resources come into two main categories, that's renewable and non-renewable. So renewable things can easily be replaced, like wind, geothermal energy, solar energy. Okay, we expect that those things are going to continue coming every day, all day, or most of the day, for most of the year. On the other hand, there's non-renewable resources. So these are things that cannot easily be replaced. So if you think about all of our fossil fuels, so oil, gas, coal, it takes hundreds of thousands of years to replace them. So they are not easily replaceable, and we refer to them as non-renewable. So this is just a breakdown. So looking at some renewable resources versus non-renewable resources. So this might seem kind of strange, but if we think about mining, okay, mining resources in general, whether you're mining for gold or phosphate, or you're mining for limestone or marble, those things are not going to easily replace themselves. So if we were to use them up, we're not going to find a way to replace them without waiting hundreds of thousands of years. So we come across this idea of a natural capital. So natural capital is just the supply of natural resources available to us. And we can use it to meet our needs or our demands. We can use it for goods. So that's things like fish, lumber, crops, to make a beautiful marble floor. Okay, we can use it for those types of products that you could buy or sell. And we can also think about the services that it provides. So we think about natural environments, doing things like filtering water, providing clean air, and preventing soil erosion. So this is another view of the natural resources and their value. So we can think again about things that we use directly, whether it's for products or for services. And then we get into these other ways that we could potentially value the natural ecosystem, even all the way down to looking at the existence value. So that would be kind of our ecocentric view, or our more deep ecologist view, that all of those living organisms have their own value and right to survive on this planet and take up space. 1 minute, someone is knocking at the door, so I'm going to pause. All right, sorry about that. So this is my plea for you, really to consider the natural services that ecosystems provide, because we often take them for granted. So this is an image here of a landslide that occurred. So we can see in the beginning, you can see it's covered with green, but there seems to be something happening already at the top. It could potentially be deforestation, because we could see these bigger trees from this satellite image around the edge, and then just some smaller green of plants in the center, and then nothing over here. And what we see is that, I'm imagining after a large storm, and we can see maybe there's some damage to the trees in this zone as well. after a huge storm, a huge amount of rain, this whole area of the land was swept away down the slope. And this is something that you don't really consider the possibility of until it actually happens. So we consider these natural services um, as being highly valuable, but I feel like we just take them too much for granted. Like these things, they do happen. So landslides have occurred, even in recent years, and they can take out huge chunks of land. And if you can imagine, if you lived up here, if this were your town up here, your house and your neighbors' houses, it would all be destroyed and washed down this hill. Okay, and now even you can see it's interfering with the river that was there as well. So consider those as real um, services provided to us. Okay. Then we look at natural income. So natural income is the annual yield of goods and services from the natural capital, and I find that a little quite wordy. So it's really the quantity or the amount that we take each year from the natural resources available. So if we cut down 5 trees from a specific area every year, that's our natural income. So then we get to this point where we're considering the sustainability of these types of projects. So let's say we're doing a forestry project where you're trying to plan how much lumber we can take and how many trees we can cut down every year. Well, how do we know if we are taking a sustainable amount? So you can pause and think about it, but common sense would tell us that, well, it's sustainable if the amount that we take can easily be replaced in a reasonable amount of time. That being the case, we can actually calculate the natural income and the sustainability of that natural income. So if we look, it says how many fish can we harvest from the pond and still have a sustainable fishery. So if we look at this pond, so this is the pond itself. Okay, we say that the population of fish in the pond is 500. We see that 200 fish swim into the pond, okay, from streams. 100 fish are born. We can imagine this is all in a year. And then just naturally 100 fish swim out of the pond and go somewhere else, and 50 of them die. Okay. So in order for us to figure out the sustainability of it, we're just looking at crunching the numbers. Okay, so we want to have 500 in our pond. We know that 300 are being added to the pond every year, and 150 leave naturally. So let's say we want to fish this pond. Okay, then it's time for us to figure out how many fish can we take, and there still be 500 fish in the pond at the end of the year. Okay. So if we have this input, this natural input of 300, the output of 150, we want to maintain the 500 that's in the pond, right? All we're doing is that little math calculation. So if we have an input of 300 and 150 are leaving naturally, then there's 150 more fish that we could potentially take for our own purposes, so to eat, to consume, and it would still remain totally sustainable. So still without 500 fish in the pond. So in our goals to look at sustainability, one of the things that people do is they look at this ecological footprint, and we will do this in class together, so we'll find a way to calculate our ecological footprint. So our ecological footprint is essentially telling us, if every person in the population followed our standards of living, and they followed our standards of living, taking into account, all of the things that we consume, all of the materials we use, all the resources we use, and all of the waste that we produce, how much space would be required to meet those demands for all people. So we will look at this together. So I know it's just the definition in this image. We'll look at it together in class and we'll make some comparisons between ecological footprints in different areas of the world as well. So ecological footprints, on top of other information, are indicators of sustainability. So they tell us something about a condition, in this case, sustainability. So any indicator is just a measure or piece of information that informs us about a condition. An example is you're looking outside of the realm of the environment. An example of an indicator might be that we take your temperature with a thermometer and we figure out you have a fever, so your temperature is too high. Okay, then we might make some conclusions based on that. So we'd say, okay, you're sick. You're having trouble maintaining those homeostatic or stable conditions within your body. We could also measure the amount of nutrients, so specifically nitrates in water in an area, and if we measured that they were unusually high, we might make a conclusion that nutrient pollution is entering the water. So this could be pollution from local farms or pollutions from factories in the area, releasing lots of chemicals that include these nutrients, and they're getting into the water. Thinking about the case study we looked at in Costa Rica, you might look at something like life expectancy as well. So if you look at life expectancy, it's telling us whether or not there's good living conditions for the people. So if we see high life expectancy, we might expect good diet, good health care, and people are living pretty good, healthy lives in general. So around the year 2000, people started looking at this Millennium Ecosystem Assessment to assess the sustainability of the world and to figure out what steps and goals we should make. So we'll look at this again in our next class. You can read through this. I am absolutely not going to read this to you, but read through it. It's some interesting information. So around the year 2000, we were trying to assess the sustainability of our world and what the conditions were like. And we found out that, things aren't perfect and we've caused some damage to the natural environment. And there are people who are suffering economically as well and are struggling to meet their needs. So from this information, we came up with some goals. So these are goals to meet actually by the year, I think, 2015, so that already passed. So these were the goals that they were trying to achieve after this Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. And you can see number 1 says to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. Well, we know that that has not entirely been achieved. So that still occurs in some areas of the world. And you can continue looking at them from there. So these goals are things that we're hoping to achieve, but we've yet to achieve. So this Millennium Assessment is a type of environmental impact assessment. So the goal is to evaluate the potential benefits and drawbacks of a project, or in the case of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, we're looking at the benefits and drawbacks of really our lifestyle here on Earth in general. So in order to do a true environmental impact assessment, there are steps. Like you have to collect some baseline data. So the Millennium Impact Assessment had some baseline data about how the world was currently running and how we'd been impacting the world. But not only that, you have to have some way of continuing to monitor those conditions. So if you get a baseline study of what's happening in an area, you have to have a plan. Like, how are you going to check in on that same area in 10 years, and 20 years, and 30 years, etc., to figure out what the impacts of your plan have been? And generally speaking, for an environmental impact assessment, because they are required by the government, they require government approval as well for a project to continue. All right, so I hope that wasn't too fast. We will talk about a lot of these ideas in class together, especially the Millennium Impact Assessment we want to go over together in class, along with the ecological footprints. But I want you to get an idea of some of this information. Remember, you really need to focus on the vocabulary, and we need to find some good ways to keep going over that vocabulary as well. So I'm going to come up with my solutions if we can, but I also want you to make sure that you're writing things down, you're reviewing your notes, and maybe if you're a flashcard person, maybe you should start making some flashcards, because I know that you don't just have vocabulary in this class, you have vocabulary in your other classes as well, and it turns out to be a heck of a lot of new stuff to learn and a heck of a lot of vocabulary words. So the sooner you can make a plan and we can get on top of it, the better. So for now, I just want you to take your notes, go back over anything you want to go over, and we will talk about any questions that we have in our next class. Okay? Bye.